Hi, welcome to Lovers of the Word. In today's video, we are starting a new series through the book of Philippians. The book of Philippians was written by Paul when he was in prison in Rome. When he was in prison, he wrote 4 letters from Rome. That is the book of Philippians, Ephesians, Philemon, and Colossians. Now, the book of Philippians was written to the people of Philippi, and this was a church that Paul had set up on his second missionary journey. And this is a church that supported him so much, and the church that gave him a lot of arms. So when Paul was writing this letter to them, he wrote it out of his heart. This was almost like a love letter he was writing to the church, and he speaks about rejoicing in the Lord. Now, this is surprising because for a person in prison, you would wonder whether he wanted to talk about joy and he wanted to talk about rejoicing in the Lord. But this is what Paul chooses to write to them, and it shows how content he was in his Christian life. Now we're going to go through the background of the book, then we'll go through the city, we'll look at the city of Philippi, and then we'll go through the book of Acts to be able to look at the journey towards Macedonia, where Philippi is. Now let's look at the city of Philippi and let's try to understand what the city was, the dynamics in that city, and when Paul got there, what really happened. Now the city of Philippi is in current day Greece. It was founded by the father of Alexander the Great, Philip II. Now this is a place that the Romans conquered in BC 42 by Emperor Augustus, and when he conquered it, he turned the whole place into a Roman city, just like Rome. So the city Philippi was given a status known as the Jus Italiacum. What that means is that just like Italy. So the city of Philippi was governed with the Roman law, and if you were given birth to in that city, you didn't have to pay taxes and you enjoy the full privileges of being a Roman citizen. Now, when the Emperor Augustus conquered Philippi, he sent a lot of veterans there. And so the city of Philippi did not speak Greek, they spoke Latin. So this is a city that was very important in the Roman Empire, and it was the capital city of Macedonia. So when you are reading the Bible and you come across Macedonia, it is in today's present day Greece. The first European church that was ever established was established in Philippi. And when Paul got to Macedonia through the port city Neapolis, Paul went straight to Philippi and spent some time there and established the first European church. Now, this is a church that was very dear to Paul, and this is a church that gave a lot of alms to Paul. They took care of Paul, such that in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 8 to 9, Paul wrote, I rob other churches by receiving support from them, so as to serve you. And when I was with you and needed something, I was not a burden to anyone, for the brothers who came from Macedonia supplied what I needed. I have kept myself from being a burden to you in any way and will continue to do so. So this is a church that gave a lot of support to Paul. And when Paul was writing the book of Corinthians, Paul talks about the fact that he was in Ephesus. And so this was the latter part when he stayed in Ephesus for 2.5 years. So this church was established on the second journey. And from the second journey to when he spent time in Ephesus with the church in Ephesus, and then when he went to Rome in prison, this is a church that continued to support Paul in all that he did and in his ministry. And so when Paul was writing the book of Philippians, Paul wrote it out of his heart. And it's almost like a person who is old and is trying to advise the younger ones, is trying to tell them, this is the way to success. This is the way you need to live your life so that you can succeed in life. So the book was written out of love for the Philippian church. And if you read Philippians chapter 4, verse 15 to 16, Paul also writes, moreover, as you Philippians know, in the early days of your acquaintance with the gospel, when I set out from Macedonia, not one church shared with me in the matter of giving and receiving, except you only. Verse 16, for even when I was in Thessalonica, you sent me aid more than once when I was in need. So this is a church that followed the ministry of Paul to wherever he went to, and they sent alms to him. And we'll read in the book of Philippians that one person that sent money and sent support from Philippi to Rome when he was in prison is Epaphroditus. And we'll read about Epaphroditus and what he did, the pains he went through, and the things he went through to be able to serve Paul in this capacity. Paul also talks about Timothy, and we read that Timothy joined his group when he got to Lystra and Derbe, and they recommended Timothy to him. He took him and sent him along. And in the book of Philippians, Paul is going to talk about Timothy as well. So this is a book that Paul wrote to a group of people that were very dear to his heart, a group of people that loved him very much and gave towards his ministry. Another thing that you should know about the city of Philippi is that it was a city that didn't have a lot of Jewish influence. Now we know this because when Paul got to that city, he found a group of women that were praying by the river. And these women were God worshippers, which means that they were Jews, and they didn't have a synagogue. To have a synagogue, you needed 10 Jewish men to form a synagogue. And so they didn't even have up to 10 men to be able to form a synagogue. And so they resorted to meeting by the riverside to just pray and to share the word. And so this was a city that didn't have a lot of Jewish influence. Now, after a while, when Paul got there and got himself into trouble, and there was a riot, we know that it wasn't from Jewish men and it wasn't from the Jewish people, as we had seen in the regions of Galatia, Phrygia, and in those areas. In those areas in Lystra, Derbe, we saw that Jews will follow him from one place to the other, cause trouble for him, and then made sure they even resulted in beating him and all that. But when there was a riot in the city of Philippi, it wasn't from the Jews. It was from the Roman people who didn't agree with him. And we'll go through all this and resolve what are the implications of all these things in the book of Philippians. So this is an introduction to the book of Philippians. In our next video, we are going to go to Acts chapter 16, and we are going to look at the journey towards Macedonia and the journey towards Philippi. Thank you very much for watching this video. Don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to this channel. God bless you, and see you in the next video as we journey towards Philippi.